It always starts the same way. A young man, college-age, clean-cut, athletic, disappears after a night out with friends. He's usually last seen near a bar or party, often just a few blocks from campus. There's no sign of a struggle, no screams, no immediate panic. Friends assume he went home. Maybe he drank too much. Maybe he's sleeping it off. But then hours pass, then days, and then, almost like clockwork, the body is found, bloated, floating in a nearby river or lake. Sometimes weeks later, sometimes months. Authorities rule it an accident, drowning due to intoxication. Another tragedy in a long list of young people who partied too hard and paid the price. Except something's not right. There's something off about these drownings, something eerie, something that feels planned. And in more than a dozen of these cases, spray painted nearby, on a bridge, a tree, a wall, a tunnel, is a symbol. Simple, childish, a smiley face. It's the calling card of what some investigators believe may be the most elusive and terrifying criminal conspiracy in modern history. A suspected network of serial killers operating across the United States, targeting young men and leaving behind a cryptic mark, the smiley face. The theory starts in the late 1990s with a man named Kevin Gannon, a veteran detective with the NYPD. Gannon had seen his share of violent crime, but the disappearance of 21-year-old Patrick McNeil in 1997 hit differently. McNeil was a promising student at Fordham University. One night, after having a few drinks with friends at a bar in Manhattan, he left alone. Witnesses saw him stumbling along the sidewalk, heading toward the East River. Then, nothing. His body turned up nearly 2 months later, miles away. Police said he drowned. Case closed. But Gannon didn't buy it. For starters, McNeil's body had floated against the current, a rare phenomenon. Second, there were signs of trauma inconsistent with drowning. But what troubled Gannon most were subtle, strange clues. Reports of a suspicious vehicle following McNeil the night he disappeared. Signs that his body may have been preserved before being placed in the river. And then, the clincher, graffiti. Just feet from where McNeil's body surfaced was a red spray-painted smiley face. It seemed like a coincidence, until it wasn't. In the following years, more cases just like McNeil's surfaced, first in New York, then in Minneapolis, Boston, Chicago, La Crosse, Wisconsin. Gannon began working with other retired detectives, including Anthony Duarte and Mike Donovan. Together, they pored over police reports, autopsy records, and mapped out cases spanning from 1997 to the mid-2000s. They found at least 45 cases that followed the same eerie pattern. Young, popular, athletic white males who disappeared after a night out, were later found dead in a body of water and whose death was ruled accidental, often too quickly. In a troubling number of cases, a smiley face was found nearby, scrawled on concrete, rocks, trees, sometimes freshly painted, sometimes weathered. It wasn't just the smiley faces, it was the geography. These weren't isolated events. These deaths occurred in clusters, mostly in the Midwest and Northeast. The distances between them suggested something bigger, something organized, a network. The men began calling it the smiley face killers. The theory was controversial. Critics called it pseudoscience. Police departments rejected the idea of a conspiracy. The FBI issued a statement in 2008 saying there was no evidence to support the theory that these deaths are the work of a serial killer or killers. But Gannon and his team insisted they were being ignored. They pointed to strange autopsy results, bodies showing lividity in odd places, suggesting victims were moved after death. Some had high alcohol levels, but their stomachs contained little liquid, implying they hadn't just left a bar and fallen in. In some cases, decomposition didn't match the timeline. A few bodies looked too well preserved to have been in the water for weeks. And the strangest thing? There were no signs of struggle in most of these drownings. How does a grown man, sober enough to walk, often athletic enough to play sports, just vanish and end up dead in water without a mark? Some victims had injuries like ligature marks or defensive wounds, but these were often downplayed or attributed to post-mortem damage from rocks, current, or wildlife. The deeper the team looked, the darker the theory became. They believed this wasn't the work of one killer, but a group, a roaming, possibly internet-connected cell-style operation. They speculated the killers met online, shared tips, and selected victims based on profile. Male, handsome, fit, often with a bright future. Victims that symbolized a certain type of success, possibly even arrogance, in the eyes of the perpetrators. Gannon believed the killers stalked their targets, waited until they were alone, then abducted them, possibly drugged or subdued them, and kept them alive for hours or days, before killing them and dumping the bodies in water, often long after the initial disappearance. The smiley face was the signature, the joke, the message. We're watching, it seemed to say, and no one can stop us. Over time, families of the victims began to believe the theory. Parents who had long doubted the accidental drowning explanation now felt validated. In 2010, the mother of Chris Jenkins, a University of Minnesota student who was found in the Mississippi River, spoke publicly. She said police originally told her Chris drowned after leaving a bar in a costume on Halloween night. But later, investigators admitted foul play was possible. Then there was Dakota James, a 23-year-old from Pittsburgh who vanished in 2017. He was last seen on surveillance footage walking near a bridge. He appeared coherent. A month later, his body was found in the Ohio River. Police said it was an accident, but an independent medical examiner hired by the family suggested Dakota may have been strangled. Near the area where he was found, another smiley face. By now, dozens of victims had been unofficially linked to the theory, some cases clearer than others. Many included similar details: missing for weeks, bodies surfacing in shallow waters that had already been searched, and evidence suggesting the victim was not in the water the entire time. Some bore marks of blunt force trauma, some were naked from the waist down, a few had duct tape residue, one had GHB, the date rape drug, in his system, and yet still law enforcement remained skeptical. They said the smiley face was one of the most common graffiti symbols in the world, that connecting cases across state lines with no clear evidence of communication or shared motive was a stretch. They said drunk people fall into rivers. They always have. But Kevin Gannon and his team believed otherwise. They believed the killers were sophisticated. They moved often, never staying in one place. They targeted with care. They planned their dump sites, checked the tides, and possibly used the dark web to coordinate. And above all, they believed this: the killers wanted you to think it was an accident, because that was the ultimate camouflage. To this day, no one has ever been charged in connection with the smiley face killer's theory. No smoking gun has emerged, no confessions, but the cases keep stacking up. And every now and then, somewhere in a quiet town near a riverbank, the pattern repeats. A young man vanishes. His face appears on a missing persons flyer, and then weeks later, he's pulled from the water. Another tragedy, they say, another drowning, and nearby, hidden beneath an overpass or behind a dumpster, someone has scrawled a crude circle with two dots and a crooked smile, like a joke, like a trophy, like a warning, or maybe a signature. You can choose not to believe the theory. You can call it coincidence, urban legend, grief-fueled speculation, but the rivers remember, and the smile never fades.